"You're Barren," he'd said, his voice flat like a gavel slamming down. He didn't even flinch as he handed me divorce papers and walked out of that mansion, leaving me standing there with a heart that felt like it had been scooped out of my chest. Back then, I thought that was the end of my story. Me, the broken wife of a tech mogul, discarded like I was nothing. But I was wrong. 3 years later, he lay unconscious on an operating table, his life in my hands. And I wasn't his wife anymore. I was his neurosurgeon. And I carried a secret he never deserved to know, that the woman he called Barren had given birth to his legacy. 3 boys who looked just like him. The night it all fell apart is etched in my memory like a scar. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like something's about to shatter. I'd cooked his favorite dinner, set the table with candles like we used to, and even wore the silk dress he once loved. He came home late, reeking of bourbon and perfume that wasn't mine. When I asked if we could talk, he smirked, his words cutting through me like glass. Talk about what, Lila? That I'm married to a mannequin with a useless womb. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. He leaned in close, his smile cruel. I married you to build a family. You can't even give me a child. That night I didn't cry in front of him. I waited until he slammed the bedroom door, and then I sank to the kitchen floor, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. The next week he handed me divorce papers like he was closing a business deal. No shouting, no tears, just cold efficiency. Sign it, he said. I begged him to try therapy, one more round of treatments, anything. He didn't even look at me. I'm done waiting. I signed that night, my hands shaking so badly the pen left smudges on the paper. And just like that, my 5-year marriage was reduced to legal jargon and silence. I packed what little I could carry, moved into a tiny apartment, and threw myself into work. At least at the hospital, I wasn't Barren. I was Dr. Lila Grant, one of the best neurosurgeons in the city. That title was the only thing holding me together. I started picking up extra shifts, operating late into the night because it was easier than going home to a dark, empty apartment. But then, the nausea started. At first I blamed exhaustion. Then one day I nearly fainted mid-surgery, gripping the operating table with trembling hands as the room spun. My best friend Tasha dragged me into an exam room after that. "You're pale as a ghost," she said, shoving a pregnancy test into my hand. I laughed bitterly. "Come on, you know I can't." But then those 2 pink lines appeared. Positive. My knees nearly buckled. I didn't even tell Tasha at first. I just sat there staring at the test tears streaming down my face. It felt like a cruel joke. I'd spent years being poked and prodded, enduring failed fertility treatments, crying in hospital bathrooms after embryo transfers that never worked. And now, after he'd called me broken and thrown me away, I was pregnant. An ultrasound a week later revealed not 1 heartbeat, but 3. Triplets. I laughed through my tears, clutching that ultrasound picture like it was gold. That night I turned off my phone when his name flashed on the screen. He didn't get to know. Not then. Maybe not ever. I wasn't going to give him the chance to walk away again. Those boys were mine. I was enough for them. Fast forward 3.5 years. My life had transformed completely. My cozy house in Santa Clara was nothing like the sterile mansion I'd once tiptoed through. Toys littered every corner. There were crayon marks on the walls, and every morning started with 3 little voices calling, Mama, Ethan, Elijah, and Evan, my calm protector, my wild adventurer, and my thoughtful observer. They each had their father's dimpled chin, but they were mine in every way that mattered. I balanced surgeries with school pickups, and even though my life was chaos, I'd never been happier. I'd built something beautiful out of the ruins. Then one Wednesday morning, as I was reviewing a patient's MRI, my chief of surgery called me. "We have an emergency transfer private jet. High-profile case, complicated brain tumor. Patient requested you by name." I frowned. "Who?" There was a pause. "Victor Hale." My heart stopped. I hadn't heard his name spoken in years. I felt like I was drowning. "He's had a series of seizures," my boss continued. "Surgery's risky. You're one of the best. He wants you. I don't know why I said yes. Maybe it was professionalism. Maybe it was closure. But when the helicopter landed on the hospital roof hours later, and I saw him being wheeled out on a stretcher, pale, frail, not the powerful CEO I once knew, I almost couldn't breathe. His eyes met mine, and for a second he looked like a ghost, seeing another ghost. "Lila," he whispered. I didn't respond. I walked alongside his gurney, calm, steady, every muscle in my body screaming with tension. That afternoon, I went over his scans. The tumor was dangerously close to his motor cortex. Surgery would be complex. He was awake, sitting in the pre-op room when he finally spoke. "You're my surgeon." His voice cracked. "Yes," I said coolly. "We'll operate tomorrow morning." He studied me. "You look different." I raised a brow. "Motherhood does that." His head snapped toward me. "You're married." "No," I said simply. He looked at me like he wanted to say more, but the door opened and chaos spilled in. 3 little boys in matching sneakers and bright red t-shirts darted into the room giggling. A nurse hurried after them, apologizing. My boys. They froze when they saw the man in the bed. "Mama, is that the sick man?" Elijah asked, his big brown eyes wide. "Yes, baby," I said softly. "This is Mr. Hale." Evan clung to my leg thumb in his mouth while Ethan climbed into a chair and peered at him. Victor's face went pale as he stared at them. His mouth opened, then closed again. "They're mine," he finally whispered, his voice shaking. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was written all over their faces. He broke down right there, sobbing into his hands. I didn't know he choked. I stood still, my voice steady but cold. "You never asked." That night, as the OR team prepped for surgery, he asked to see them again. I refused. "You'll see them when you're strong enough," I said. He flinched, but didn't argue. When I walked in for pre-op rounds, he looked at me with haunted eyes. "You knew." Before the divorce, I shook my head. "I found out after. But you don't get to ask me that. Not after what you did." His face crumpled. "You're right," he whispered. I leaned close, my voice low, calm, and razor sharp. "You called me broken, disabled, barren. Do you remember that?" He swallowed hard. "I remember every word, and yet I carried your children alone. I named them alone. I held their hands when they cried, took them to every doctor's appointment, built a home without you." Tears ran down his face. "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry." I stepped back. "I don't want your apology. I want you to survive this surgery, so those boys won't grow up wondering why the man who abandoned them also died without trying." The next morning, I stood under the bright surgical light, scalpel in hand. He was unconscious, head-marked, and shaved machines beeping softly around us. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. In that moment, I wasn't his ex-wife. I wasn't the woman he humiliated. I was his surgeon, and I was about to save his life. Because somewhere down the hall, 3 little boys were coloring pictures of superheroes, waiting for their father to wake up. Hours later, the tumor was out. Clean margins. Minimal bleeding. He'd live. When he finally opened his eyes, I was sitting by his bed, chart in hand. "You stayed," he rasped. I nodded. "I monitor all my patients after major surgery." He tried to smile. "That's professional." "Yes," I said. He swallowed. "You didn't have to save me." "I know." Weeks of rehab followed. He was softer now, quieter, stripped of the arrogance that once defined him. One afternoon, he asked if he could be part of their lives. I studied him for a long moment. "That's not just up to me. They don't know you." "Not yet." He nodded. "Then let me earn it." Something in his voice told me he meant it. So I gave him one chance. "Come to story time next week," I said, "if you're well enough." He showed up in jeans and a sweater, holding a bouquet of wildflowers and a children's book. The boys stared at him cautiously, and he knelt down, smiling nervously. "Hi, I'm your dad." Elijah squinted at him. "Can you read books with funny voices?" He chuckled. "I'm a fast learner." That night they laughed so hard the neighbors probably heard. For the first time in years, I felt hope flicker in my chest. 2 years later, our backyard was filled with laughter. Victor lay in the grass, 3 giggling boys climbing over him like puppies. He wasn't the man who had once shattered me. He'd rebuilt himself brick by brick, showing up every day, reading bedtime stories, patching scraped knees, building cardboard rocket ships. Forgiveness didn't erase the scars. It never does. But somehow those scars became part of something stronger. A family rebuilt from ruin. Now I want to ask you, what would you have done? Could you forgive someone who broke you so completely if they truly changed? Or are some mistakes unforgivable? Tell me in the comments and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And if you've ever been called broken, remember, sometimes the pieces come together into something even more beautiful.